Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this is the Talamanca Review. It's 7:57 p.m. on Thursday, the 27th of November, and it has been raining a lot where I am, and it comes down in sudden bursts. I had a big power outage yesterday. Yeah, many things. So tonight, I want to talk about a number of things which are really one thing. Well, that sounds weird, right? I'm going to talk about many things that are really one thing. Old Bruce doing his Zen cone, sound of one hand clapping, stuff like that. But I want to try and teach you, or confirm if you already know yourself, but these are not things that are spoken about openly. Teach you or confirm what you already know about how you can predict the future and how you can understand timeline probabilities and how you can interpret energetics in such a way in the moment. This isn't future gazing. It isn't remote viewing. It isn't traveling on the timeline. This is not a psychic skill. This is a spiritual skill. And one of the things that I like to do on the Talamanca Review is constantly delimit between the psychic and the spiritual. I thought I had a great 1-hour interview catch up with Brian Rue yesterday. I hope you enjoyed it. Brian's been podcasting for years. He's out of Vancouver, British Columbia, and he mainly deals with UFOs and 20th century history. And he used to, but not so much anymore, talked a lot about the Jewish influence on society. And it was really quite enlightening to talk to him off air sometimes. He would say things I didn't know. And reveal things that are not public knowledge. Like I'll give you one example. It was Brian who told me, and I don't know if this is I think it's for all of North America, but when I was speaking to him, he was just speaking about Canada. And he was talking about how even when the Eastern schools of Buddhism come over here to set up groups, they're heavily indoctrinated into the Jewish worldview. And so the Western Buddhism, in a sense, becomes a kind of Judaized form of Buddhism. And he told me that this is true for the Vedic teachers that come over as well. Now, remember, when I say Jewish, I'm talking about the ritual magicians. And most Jews are not ritual magicians. They're practicing the Torah, and they're good people, okay? I gotta constantly remind myself to say that, because the Talamanca Review focuses on the screw that needs to be turned. It doesn't condemn the machine. Just the screw that needs to be tightened, so your perspective is correct. And it's often confused with the Jews because a lot of it seems to be coming out of that culture. And but there are opponents to it even within that culture. Okay, they don't share what goes on inside that world with the Gentile world. It's like the mafia. What happens in the Jewish world stays in the Jewish world. But I know for a fact that there have been serious disputes about certain practices in Kabbalistic circles, and specifically Chabad, and the sodomizing of young Jewish boys, which is a ritual in that community. The spiritual rationality for it is to wean the child off the mother, psychologically break the child from the mother. And so it could be a relative or a rabbi, but I saw a Vice documentary one time. It got taken down. You can't find it anymore. But it was a 35-minute documentary done by Vice about pedophilia in the Jewish world. And they were speaking to Jewish experts who were trying to stop it. And these Jewish experts, or insiders, living in that Brooklyn community. Is it Brooklyn or the Bronx where the Chabad Center is in New York? I can't remember, but at least 50% of the boys are raped. Okay? And you have to ask yourself, why hasn't that hit the public? Why has there been such a spotlight on the Catholic Church? But really, it doesn't matter. That's just getting into a cultural distraction. Okay? The real thing that you need to understand is that this is a form of occult ritual. It's more occult than sexual. And as such, it should be seen as an occult ritual, not as a sexual ritual. Okay? Or a sexual obsession or a sexual impulse even. Okay? And you can see this commingling of sexuality and spirituality in many different forms. In the East, you get Tantra. The tantric practices. And Osho was, I would say, a tantric deviant, or trying to figure out how to say this, a tantric innovator, if you want to look at it in a non-judgmental way. But Osho believed that the sexual impulse was so strong that in the West, the quickest path to enlightenment was Tantra. I don't know a lot about Tantra. I do not know a lot about it at all. I'm just giving it as another example of sex and spirituality, or sex and occult practice, depending on your disposition toward Osho, I suppose. Now, God, how did I get on that tangent? I can't even remember. So tonight we're talking about one thing, which is many things, and it's about how things happen and how you can see things that are going to happen. Okay? So my ability to predict the near future has been very, very accurate in the last 20 years. I was telling people in my little coffee shop groups and people who I held sway with. Remember, I was a little bit famous in Canada when I published my novel in 2007. And I was openly speaking way back then in 2008 and 2009. 2007, almost 20 years ago, about a time coming in North America where complete lawlessness and chaos would ensue, and that police would be attacked, and there would be random shootings of people, and it would just become completely chaotic. And in the time I've been over here in Costa Rica, I've had a few people reach out to me from those days, because my email's been the same since 1997. And they said, "How did you know?" And I said, "Well, you could see it in the energy currents of the day." So it becomes a kind of physics based on an understanding of consciousness and energy, and how energy gets formed into thought and feeling, coupled with the natural biological consciousness, which has certain desires and certain expressions, and the government's overt trampling of those rights and expressions of human beings that are living freely. And it creates a blockage. And it's only a matter of time before that blockage creates an explosion, a psychic explosion. And because a lot of people are walking around in the same state of mind, even if they don't know each other, but they've been inculcated into that state of mind based on the environment they're living in, when it starts, there's a kind of domino effect. And you can see it going on in the US now with all of these random shootings. I'm not sure if it's going to start in Canada. I would say it has a 50-50 chance of starting in Canada, but you have to remember, Canada is a profoundly unarmed country. You know, the United States is the most armed country in the world, or one of the most armed countries in the world. And so if I were an intelligence force, an intelligence collective, whether global or another nation, and I were looking to take down the US, I would not confront the United States directly. I would seek to destroy them in a more feminine way than a masculine way. The feminine modality of destruction is to induce self-destruction. Okay? You see this a lot in men who go through divorce court and everything. Women have profound power. Don't believe this victimhood nonsense that Margaret Atwood is putting out in The Handmaid's Tale. It's complete nonsense. Women have unbelievable power. Okay? And the reason is that there's a natural instinct in men to protect and please women. And an evil woman can use that natural impulse for evil things. Now, when I say that the battle tactic I would use, now when I'm speaking this way, you may consider me to be in my Michael Aquino mode. Okay? This is psychological warfare, no moral boundaries, nothing is off the table. Your only mission is to destroy your enemy. Okay? We're not talking Marquess of Queensberry here. We're not even talking lawful military engagement like the Iraq incursion. Lawful in the sense that it goes through proper channels and speeches are given at the United Nations and certain countries vote against it and certain countries vote for it. And it's a semi-lawful process. I don't think killing people from a spiritual perspective can ever be considered lawful if the killing requires that a foreign party invade another nation. I think it's lawful for the invaded nation to kill. This is my understanding after years of studying these things in various scriptures, and coming to this conclusion and having it, or being given this conclusion by various masters and teachers throughout the centuries, you know, when they're asked these questions by their disciples. Remember, I mean, I'm the kind of guy that has just been reading this stuff his whole life. I read the entire collected lectures. I think it was a 40-volume set in my early 20s. I found a Ukrainian sort of theosophical store in the west end of Toronto. For those of you who know Toronto, it was Bloor West Village around Runnymede and Bloor. And there used to be this bookstore there, and there was a small printing press in Europe that had published all of the lectures of Miguel Ivanov, the last master of the open face, the public-facing White Brotherhood. Very interesting occult and spiritual organization. I mean, this is what I was reading from like 22 to 26, right? And then all the main scriptures, you know, and then the important teachings of long-lasting spiritual voices, like Milarepa, like the Tibetan Book of the Dead. All, you guys know. I don't need to go through the whole list. But the general idea from the masters is, from the wise people is, from the realized people is that killing is always unlawful unless your home is invaded. And then you have a right to defend your home. And, you know, when you think about that, and when you think about the mission that the WEF has set out for itself, it's quite daunting, because they're talking about changing human nature. Okay? Because remember, Although a human being is a spirit living in a body, we are still an animal. We're still a mammal on this planet, and we understand that by our similarity to other mammals. Our distinction is we're bipedal. Nothing else in nature is bipedal. A bear can walk on 2 feet for a short distance. A gorilla can walk on 2 feet for a short distance. A chimp can do it, but generally they're running on their hind legs and their knuckles, right? We're the only bipedal animal on the planet, walking on 2 feet. And the principle in the evolutionary matrix we live in is that when you're standing erect like this, your head is going up, which means you're ready to receive the divine. You're ready to receive the sun. You're looking at the light, right? Where everything else is more close to the ground. But that one distinction aside, that we're bipedal, you can note that we have tremendous similarities with the other mammals on this planet. And the one I constantly reference, brilliantly captured, I believe it was in, I can't remember if it was the Tao Te Ching or the Inner Chapters by Zhuangzi, which is a more expansive interpretation of Taoism. But we share 7 orifices above the neck. So, a mouth, 2 nostrils, 2 eyes, and 2 ears. We see this repeated everywhere. We see it in cattle, we see it in dogs, we see it in cats, we see it in fox, we see it everywhere. We see it in the chimps, we see it in the monkeys. So it's a DNA design template on this planet, and we're at the apex of expression of this DNA. And the design template of any living thing is always reaching to God. Okay? God being creation, the creator. You can substitute the great stillness or the great being for that if you want to look at it from a Buddhist perspective. I don't mean to be offensive by using the word God, okay? I grew up with it, I'm comfortable with it, so I use it. And so we have this situation now where we're being conditioned to do a U-turn. Okay? So if we're not going to own anything, then that means that the expectation of privacy is completely forfeit. That means that if we don't own the home, anybody can come in anytime, any actor in the state. Could be child protective services, could be the police, could be your landlord, if there are landlords in this future plan with the WEF. It could be anybody. Okay? But you don't have this expectation of a secure domicile. Now, when you go back and you look at the history of law, the domicile is a very interesting thing to study. It was always considered in British common law extremely dangerous to try to arrest someone at their home. There had to be very good reasons to do it. And even in the modern law, up to about 5 or 10 years ago, you used to have to get a special warrant to arrest somebody at home. Okay? So when warrants get issued, the police wait till they see you walking down the street and then pull the cruiser over and arrest you. Okay? You can have a warrant. The police know where you live, but they're not going to go to your home and arrest you because they don't have a home arrest warrant. Now, the reason the law evolved this way is the danger inherent in trying to arrest somebody at their home, going back to this biological consciousness. Okay? Now, if you think what I'm saying is nonsense, put your hand in a badger hole sometime. See what happens. Walk into a cave where a bear is with its cubs. See, no other animal will go in that cave because it smells the bear. But we humans, we don't really have a good sense of smell, so we may go into the cave. You would be met with tremendous resistance because the bear has claimed that space as a domicile. You see, this is universal basic law. Okay? Now, this wasn't part of what I was just planning to say, but it just popped into my head, so I'll say it. Consider the humiliation of the Palestinians. Okay? Because even when they're not being bombed and they're not being attacked and they're not being outright murdered and genocided, which is what's going on now, they're routinely humiliated. So this idea of the home being sacred doesn't exist in the relationship between the IDF and the Palestinians. And the favorite thing of the Palestinians to do is to kick in doors in the middle of the night and let people know, you're just visiting here. We can come here anytime we want. And it's constantly trying to agitate or provoke this sense of domicile, which is a natural instinct in human beings. So the idea of property ownership evolved, and the idea of the domicile evolved, and the idea of a special warrant to arrest someone at home evolved in deference to this, because through our history over the centuries, it had proven to be quite dangerous to arrest people at their home. Because that's where people sleep. That's where they're relaxed. That's where their wife and children are. And that's what they're going to defend. Okay? I think one of the best examples of this in the modern world in the last 100 years is probably the Irish and the Irish Republican Army and their absolute refusal to be humiliated and dominated by the British. So we're in a process of being reconditioned now. Okay? Now, I'm going to let you in a little bit on how I predict things. I come to an understanding of what a human being is. Okay? What a human being needs, what a human being will and will not put up with. Okay? And then I look at what happens when state actors start violating that basic human sanctity and dignity. Okay? Now, you could easily make the case at this point in my argument, Bruce, there are a lot of people who don't deserve that dignity anymore. People who attack and kill women and children or rape women and children. Maybe they don't, and I would agree with you. And for those kinds of capital crimes, the home arrest warrant is usually given, and they go to the home, kick in the door. But the cops can't just come to your house over parking tickets or something, over a missed court date on a misdemeanor and arrest you. Okay? Maybe they can on a bench warrant. I don't want to mislead people legally. But this isn't a podcast on legal advice. It's a podcast on human nature and what's being done to human nature now and what the consequence of that is going to be. And the consequence is going to be chaos. Okay? And then the chaos has been accounted for because the people manufacturing the chaos wanted the chaos to exist. And that chaos is a separate energetic ingredient or dispatch or flow of energy in their very ritualistic sequence of events to produce a result, action, reaction, solution. They've got it all mapped out. Okay? Another example we're living through right now is our relationship with the Muslim world and the Muslims who've emigrated to the West. Which, when you think about it, in hindsight, given what the Allied forces did to Iraq and some surrounding countries in 2003, for no reason, because Saddam Hussein was not involved in the attack on the Twin Towers, the violation and humiliation of the Islamic world is something that cannot sit with them according to their scripture. They're not going to forgive that. Islam is not a passive religion. It's an active religion. There is no mandate to turn the other cheek. Now, the invaders who did all that stuff 22 years ago and have executed the 7 countries in 7 years plan, although they didn't achieve the 7-year time frame, that's irrelevant. They still, in a sense, achieved the plan. What they did is they humiliated all those countries. And they stoked those countries with a profound resentment. And then began allowing immigration in the same generation that the incitement occurred. Which is absolute lunacy when you think about it. Absolute lunacy. So this entire immigration plan knows that these people coming in are going to be dangerous. But you see, that's what they want. Because ultimately what they want is the collapse of these societies. Because when the societies collapse and you're living in chaos, violence, and rape, people will accept any form of government, even if it's tyrannical. And so this is the methodology they've chosen to break the Western spirit. And whether it works or not, I don't know. In some measure, it's working. Witness just today or yesterday, the Afghan national who was given immigration to the United States who killed 2 National Guards. Okay? The backstory is he worked for the CIA in Afghanistan. Well, apparently, he still carried a few grievances toward America. So really, in a lot of ways, what you're witnessing is the great working, which is attempting to recenter the world in Jerusalem, have it brought under Noahide law, which may be the form of law that is offered to humanity when the chaos becomes unbearable. It's like waterboarding. It's like torture. If you're ever taken captive by an enemy, just tell them what you know. Don't try to be a hero. Everybody breaks. Everybody breaks. It's well known. I mean, don't be a goof about it. Don't become a collaborator like John McCain at the Hanoi Hilton during the Vietnam War. But don't think you can withstand it. Nobody can. You know, nobody can. Well, Christ did. You know, he did. What's up, buddy? Christ did an actual, well, but Christ he didn't withhold anything. He lived and died in the same truth. And he died even loving the people who tortured him. One sec, the dog, my one-man canine audience here needs to leave. You want to go? Okay, buddy, if you go, don't come back, okay? So, that's one dimension of how I predict things. And I never use this ability to make money. I think that would be blood money, and I'm not going to do it. A lot of people disagree with me and make their money out of chaos. In fact, the richest people in the world have made their money not only out of chaos, but by creating the chaos and then profiting from it. Okay? And so really what we're seeing is the hell realm come into the world. You see, the earth and human beings are neutral nodal points for any dimension to work through us. This is what is incredibly unique to the human being. Astral entities cannot do this. They cannot become portals for things all over the universe. They have more, depending on your state in the astral, you have more mobility. I mean, you can probably go to various places in the solar system and see how they live on other planets. And when we say that there's life all through the solar system, remember, it's not necessarily physical. It could be an astral life because the planet no longer sustains physical life. And so if the planet can't sustain physical life and there can be no incarnation, then the astral life continues until the planet rehabilitates and can take life. Or there are other spiritual forces and actors, agents of the Creator, agents of the life mission, life as a principle, not an individual life, who will take those astral beings to other planets to incarnate there. This has happened on Earth a number of times. Okay? I myself am as a result of this. The Tuatha De Danann came in after the flood. I haven't been here that long. As a being. So the earth is relatively new to me. I'd say that my body, well, I don't know. Let's just stay away from that, okay? So the chaos is being manufactured. It's being capitalized on. And there's a political goal to all of this. Not really a political goal, more of a destructive goal. Okay? Now, the science of destruction is fascinating. It is absolutely a fascinating study. I do admire the great occultists who've mastered the destructive processes, like Michael Aquino. I wouldn't do it. Not part of my life mission. But I recognize the discipline, the commitment, and everything that went into making him Colonel Aquino and the master of psychological warfare for the U.S. Army, and also bringing in the Temple of Set and Satanism into the U.S. military. So my disposition is different than that of a Catholic. And of course it's going to be different, not just a Catholic, Freudian slip there, but a Christian. Okay, and the reason is Christians are operating in a very astral consciousness, astrophysical. It's basically a two-dimensional religion. If it were any more than that, they'd realize that they reincarnate and things aren't a straight line, which they think it is now, but more of a circle. Constantly, everything is more circular. Okay? As I believe I explained yesterday, being interviewed by Brian, which I enjoy, by the way. I enjoy Brian's work, and we've deviated now. He's seeing a very positive light to the hybridization program. I'm not sure about that. I don't have an opinion right now either way. I've always regarded it negatively. But a new human being is coming, and it has nothing to do with transhumanism. Transhumanism is the darkest forces on this planet trying to prevent this change by pretending they have a viable option to choose. But once you choose that option, you're in big trouble. Big trouble. And I think this is what's meant by the biblical teachings, the mark of the beast and being written out of the book of life and all of these things. And I don't mean to be condescending when I say flippant stuff like, Christianity is a two-dimensional religion and we live in a 12-dimensional reality. It's still a very important religion because a lot of people are still grappling with this astral physical reality and how it works. Okay? Not so much me. So I respect it, and it is what it is, and I'm not going to be too critical of it. So that's the snapshot of the moment. Now, those of you who've been watching the Talamanca Review for a while know that everything I'm saying at a broad overview tonight is meticulously footnoted in this podcast, the Talamanca Review. As the saying goes, as it regards Candace Owens and her position on Israel, I've brought the receipts. And I've shown people what's really going on. So it's all through my podcasts in various chapters and various forms. So that's a very low-level psychological element of how I predict things. It's based on basic human nature, which is really immovable. You can be convinced your nature is different for a period of time if you're living in a false reality. And most cities are false realities. The true reality on this planet is nature. Okay? It's nature. I keep saying this, all of our spiritual teachings have come out of nature. All of Christ's parables use nature, a mustard seed, all kinds of things, sowing seeds, some fall, he always uses natural metaphors. The entire system of Taoism is built out of the natural world, going up into the other dimensions. Buddhism as well. So nature is the benchmark, and the more you live outside of nature, the more you live in neon light, the more you live around power cables all the time, the more you live with very powerful transmission waves around you all the time, cell phone and 5G and all of these other forms of waves, realize you're living in an artificial construct, and therefore in that construct it becomes very easy to confuse human beings. okay? Which is why all of the popular art or popular culture that has emerged since the 1950s has been a steady progression to banality, ugliness, degradation, and decadence. And at every step of the way, they called it art. You know, whether it be the beat writers in the 60s, Allen Ginsberg and William S. Burroughs, two confessed pedophiles, by the way. And it's just been this steady progression to this point of absolute degeneration. And to really bring it into focus, they had to get the internet up. They had to get the pornography going. They had to get all of the traumatic stuff up on the internet, which far exceeds what you'd experience in a normal lifetime just living your life. Okay? I mean, if you lived in nature prior to the radio, prior to television, prior to all of modern communication, I mean, what are you going to see? You might see somebody shot in a drunken saloon fight or bar fight over some money in a card game. Okay, so you saw a person shot. You might see somebody killed in a farming accident, a threshing machine, or kicked by a mule. It's traumatic. All right? But right now, we're living in a trauma overdose. I mean, I can hardly look at X anymore. Okay? I look at X, Twitter, and I don't know what it is about the algorithms they're using there, but they're so diabolical. Everything is just somebody being stomped by 5 people on a subway in New York City, people beating up other people 5-on-1. Just horrible shit. It's almost like, what the dark web might have been like 20 years ago. It's very traumatic. And that trauma is not part of your natural life experience. It didn't come into your world in the 3D reality in your timeline. It's coming from a 2-dimensional reality, a flat screen. Your computer, your cell phone, your tablet, right? Your television, okay? And this trauma overdose is part of what has created the liberal lunatic, the Karens. We got to stop this. We got to stop this. If you'll notice when I'm talking to people, I did it to Brian last night. And I asked him, I said, what's it like in Canada? What's it like to walk around Vancouver? And he was like, oh, it's okay. He says, yeah, there's a lot of homeless people. There's a lot of drug addicts. He said, violent crime is not that high. But if you were to look at Vancouver through the lens of X or TikTok or something else, some other form of social media, you'd think it was Escape from New York with Snake Plissken. So that's part of what's going on as well. And that is to create a mindset of helplessness. Again, as we move closer and closer to a tyrannical government, they need us in a submissive state. Please protect us. Please protect us. Please protect us. Okay? We'll accept anything. Will you allow us to come into your home without a warrant? Yes. Just stop these people from, harming my children and harming my family and harming me. Please just protect us. And this has always been one of the perils of collective organization. I have never seen an example of collective organization beyond tribal that has worked well and sustained itself. The reason societies always collapse is because the anonymity in them allows us to be less than human. Okay, so our dark sides can be expressed when we view someone as lesser than us. Hence, and I apologize for constantly using them as my reference point, but it's low-hanging fruit, and I don't feel like I can't think of anything right now. But when you look at the violence in the IDF and these young Jewish soldiers now, growing up in that school system and growing up with all of the nonsense they're taught, and they're the chosen people, the world hates them, everybody's jealous, this is our homeland, we have fought for 2 millennia to get back here, this can't be taken away from us. And by the way, these people were fighting our animals. God, our God, does not recognize them as human beings. Now, as soon as you take that status away from a bipedal mammal, which is the human being, and a religious authority and a governmental authority tells you they're animals, they're not human beings, well, then you get the psychosis. You get the psychotic behavior, sniping the women, sniping the children, shooting them in the head, laughing about it, going to get drunk afterwards, after their shift at the wall in the IDF. Donald Trump is doing a version of this chaos management in the United States. Make America great again. I mean, it was great for about 30, 40 years. But even through all of that, the post-World War II operatives, Majestic 12, DARPA, all of these secret chambers of government that went on to form the breakaway civilization that Catherine Austin Fitts references, have been secretly growing alongside those great decades of America. So there was something off about them. When you think about it in that context, there was something profoundly off about them. Now, the other way to predict the future is through the imagination and the expression of imagination. Okay? And so again, you've seen me talk about this in Comic Books Are the Ultimate Disclosure, which made a nice essay in the Talamanca Review book. And so what are we seeing all the time? What is the major dominant theme in popular culture now? It's a breach of the sanctity of the earth as a realm, and enemies coming in from another realm, not harmonious and part of our time-space continuum. We see it again and again and again and again, over and over and over and over again. Okay? This and the idea of the multiverse, which is a relatively new one, which is, in a way, the disclosure about the time travel tinkering they did in the super soldier programs. That's where that's coming from. You see, here's something Cliff High gets completely right. Okay? Now, he corroborates this with his web bots and the way he gathers information and everything, and I'm not sure that's right. I'm not sure it's wrong either. But what he does get right, and what Cliff says all the time, is that human beings are naturally clairvoyant. And he's right. But when we receive clairvoyant information, we don't necessarily know it's clairvoyant. Okay? That's a whole separate process of refining consciousness to get to the point where it can receive conscious clairvoyance. Okay? But we are all incidentally clairvoyant. Okay? And this is because our timeline is staged on the fourth dimension, which for most people would be called, in psychological terms, the unconscious. The contemplative process is to make the unconscious conscious. Okay? So if the timeline is staged in the fourth dimension and we're there, then the incidental clairvoyance comes out in novels, music, comic books, movies, because the creative people are going to this place they don't quite understand. Part of them is going there and saying, I'm going to write this really cool story about this powerful being in the universe called Thanos, who decides the world is, the universe, not just the world, the universe is overpopulated, and he's going to depopulate it by 50%. Now, this is where people who don't do their spiritual work fall down in the alternative media. They always attribute insider status to people who produce this stuff. And it's not the case. It could be an entity or being giving it to them in a dream, and it so slowly works its way into their consciousness as a creative project. And when they start to work on the creative project, they open up a more conscious connection with the clairvoyant or prescient information coming in. This is the case with my book, The Stolen Child. To a lesser degree, even God as an economist from a socio-political perspective and the idea of society collapsing. But The Stolen Child really puts a ribbon around everything that's happening. And that was given to me. Okay? Now, the part of my conscious participation in this is my ability to go into altered states in meditation, which are more powerful than plant-based or medicine-based altered states, by the way. The naturally achieved altered state is much more productive, much more beneficial, and much more expanding than the ayahuasca trip or the ibogaine trip or the peyote trip or the mushroom trip. Okay? Do those things if you have to convince yourself that this other reality and these other realities exist, but don't treat it as a spiritual path and go on medicine retreats 2, 3, 4 times a year, as so many people are doing now. And I'm absolutely convinced they're absolutely screwing up their consciousness. So what is the distillation of this breaking of our realm? Okay, which we get many representations of it in the popular consciousness, the comic book, the Marvel movies, the DC movies, everything. Okay? Well, I'll tell you what it is. It is the desire of some organized force or forces on this planet to open gateways to hell and bring it into this realm, bring hell into this realm. That's what they're trying to do. Okay? And you would do very well to remember that as you go through all of the crazy temptations in the world now. Like Stephen Greer's CE5, Close Encounters 5, direct consciousness expression or communication with extraterrestrials. You know, I've never sought that in my life. It's gone the other way, where the extraterrestrials have sought me out for some reason. I figure out what they want. I give it to them if it's benign, helpful, if it's true, necessary, kind, the 3 Buddhist ethics for saying or doing something. I help them out and I send them on their way. I've never once gone looking for extraterrestrials. I couldn't give a bigger shit about extraterrestrials. Are they real? Yeah. How many people do you know like me who know all this stuff is real, but at the same time don't give a shit? Okay? That is indicative of a higher state of consciousness, because I've gone through all that stuff and I realize it's really not that important and it's a waste of time. So the tribulation we're going to go through, and we're going through it now, is more and more of this hell. You know what captures it really, really well? And it's perfectly timed because season 5 just came out yesterday on Netflix, for those of you who watch it. But the Netflix series Stranger Things, that is basically documenting the super soldier program. 11 would be an example of a super soldier, although they omit the fact that the children are tortured and raped and violated from infancy, from 1 month old or 1 day old. They're completely traumatized and violated to accelerate psychic awakening. They leave that out of the series. But the general idea of this realm being breached is absolutely real. Okay, it's absolutely real. It's going on every day. You know, this Mercury retrograde we're in now is one of the wickedest I've been in. Right? It's just absolutely wicked to go through all of this. It's like non-stop, all the crazy shit that's going on with this Mercury retrograde. So I hope this helps you understand the time you're living in. And the only remedy is inner work. Whatever your inner work is. If you're Christian and you're comfortable with prayer, all the power to you. Get your prayer up to 1 hour or 2 hours a day. Go in a quiet room by yourself. put your palms up and pray to your God, talk to your God for an hour a day, hour in the morning, hour at night. If it's meditation for you, do your meditation. It's the only chance we have of counterbalancing what's coming in, is tapping into our innate spiritual nature. That's the only thing. And that's the only spiritual purpose for all of this calamity. And remember, there's always a divine purpose for what's going on. So if we're going to a new human, going back to Brian's hybridization program and all of these things, there's going to be a purging process and there's going to be a purification process. And some people on the planet are going to go through massive transformations in their perception and consciousness in a very, very short period of time. Okay? Very, very short period of time. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this has been the Talamanca Review.